Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Autism Stories. I'm your host, Doug Bletcher, the founder of Autism Personal Coach. Autistic people are the true experts of the autistic experience, and Autism Stories is where we interview autistic people to learn from their diverse stories, experiences, and get their insights. If you would like to be notified about each week's episode of Autism Stories, we suggest you subscribe on your favorite podcast listening platform. On today's episode, Percy de la Luna joins us to discuss a volunteer program he created for adolescents and teens, as well as the intersection of being Indigenous and autistic. We hope you enjoy today's conversation. Percy, thanks so much for joining me here on Autism Stories.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here.
And I'd love to start off our conversation by learning, where does your story in the autistic community begin?
It's a great question. I grew up already serving the disabled community through churches, school groups, participating as a bunny. And it wasn't until college, really, where I started taking psychology classes and really learning about autism that I started going, wait a minute, why does this describe me and the struggles that I have had for most of my life? Does that explain why I never pick up on sarcasm? Why I can get overwhelmed so easily? Why a change in my routine can completely disrupt my entire day? And it finally started giving me answers to questions of, oh, I was just a weird, quirky kid. So I remember going into therapy one day, talking to my therapist named Anthony, and I said, Anthony, do you think that there's maybe a possibility that I'm autistic? And he looks up from his notes and goes, wait, you didn't know? And I think that just helped piece it all together of, okay, other people are seeing it. I'm seeing it. I think I can start living in it and allowing myself accommodations and resources and tools need for life.
In addition to being autistic, you're also an Indigenous person. From my understanding, you're looking to uplift informal education and nonprofit missions. What do you think is important for nonprofits to know so for those that are Indigenous and autistic are not being left out in regards to education and support from these nonprofits?
I'm really glad you incorporated this question. And I spent a couple days trying to think of a concise and full answer. And I think in a lot of things, one thing that is shared between being Indigenous and being autistic is we're going to do things differently. The way we approach problems are going to be differently. So I think there needs to be empathy in the way we are going to engage in education, in nonprofits, in community building is going to look different. As an autistic person, I'm going to need different types of accommodation. Whereas an Indigenous person, I might have different expectations that I'm going to be holding these organizations from. You know, if an organization is wanting to do an Indigenous Heritage Night, I'm going to be critical about who did they invite, who was in the conversations, who were the curators, and what was bought off of Amazon and not from an Indigenous creator. In that same regards, if someone was having a night for autism acceptance and celebration, who is there? Who is talking? Is anyone that's talking autistic? What kind of resources? Are they only focusing on having autistic people act more neurotypical? Or are they really hoping to see them thrive in their uniqueness, in what makes them different, and be supportive of that? So I think it's really important for these nonprofits to be patient, to do research, and to really be critical about where they're getting their sources. Is this coming from a place that has a history of being harmful to these communities? Or are these coming from people with lived experiences in the communities, in the cultures? Because both of them have very distinct and beautiful cultures. Be mindful and think about us from the beginning, not just have a epiphany at the end of planning. We need to have been in the beginning.
So I guess I'm interested in about Indigenous Heritage Nights in the sense that a lot of times I'll look at these autism awareness nights as kind of just performative. How do you kind of like look at kind of the Indigenous Heritage Nights?
Here in Texas, I have never seen a non Indigenous person do a land acknowledgement, ever. But I've traveled for work and for other things up north to two cities in particular, Minneapolis and Seattle, and I heard them very often by non Indigenous people. So it's really interesting of just the regions where it's being held. So for to do it up north, and I talked to someone who worked as a decolonization manager for a museum up in Seattle, and he told me any day I'm not making someone mad is a day I didn't do my job. And for him in that role, in the fact that his museum already has that role, he told me, doing a land acknowledgement, that's the bare minimum, that's performative. Whereas to do that land acknowledgement here in Texas, that would be revolutionary because it's not done. It's not our norm yet. So I think it's important to be asking them, and I can tell what your goals were. Were you giving yourself a pat on the back, or was this really truly education? Who is talking, who's in the room, and are they using the correct verbiage? I got to see at a local university a wonderful lecture from an Indigenous writer. We got a copy of her book before it was even released. It was amazing, very thankful. And it opened with not only a land acknowledgement, but a call for the 4 directions. And it was led by an Indigenous person. The only non-Indigenous person that spoke during that night was like the dean of the school who was introducing them. And that was it. After that, the reins were completely taken to local Indigenous folks and the author, who I really enjoyed hearing. It was a wonderful discussion. And I think that's how I could tell, oh, this is authentic. It was free to come see this lecture. You did not have to be a student. So the fact that it was openly available, so the accessibility, the physical accessibility of the space was phenomenal. And the fact that the people talking were people who live in that experience and live in that culture and live in that truth, that I could tell was not performative, but truly education. When it doesn't hit those markers, that's when I go, okay, this is a PR. This is a pat on your back. This is I got brownie points for saying the word Indigenous.
It's kind of like, here we go again.
Yes.
Currently, you are getting your master's in sociology. What inspired you to kind of pursue this path?
Yeah. So my undergrad is in psychology with a minor in sociology. And kind of halfway through my education journey, I realized I just really resonated more with what I was learning from sociology. So when it came time to think about masters, that's where I knew I wanted to go. I really want my focus to be the community needs for teens and emerging adults through the lens of disability, of queerness, and of being a BIPOC teen. That comes from my work with teens as a volunteer coordinator, as someone who is and has developed a 4-year program for teens. I've gotten to see firsthand where, as a community, we've let them down. Where we have missed the mark and left them to kind of scramble for themselves as adults, especially in those 3 lenses of life. So I want to go back to school to know how better to uplift and support them. So I'm really excited. I start classes in January. So I just bought all my school supplies. First time buying school supplies in like 2.5 years. But I'm really excited to get back into the classroom and keep learning.
I'm really interested in you talking about us kind of like missing the mark in kind of like supporting teens and younger people from the kind of perspective that I see a lot of times adults judging teens and maybe trying to punish or kind of things like that. When I kind of look at these adults and they really don't have their stuff together. And it's a learning process. It's a learning process. So is that kind of what you were talking about in terms of missing the mark, or were there some other things?
Very similar to that, but there are three, I guess, sociological phenomenons that I am seeing in my own community here in San Antonio, Texas, that I'm tailoring this program to be counter for. So the first one is the brain drain. That's the associated phenomenon of your top talent, your top athletes, or your top scholars moving away for further education and not coming back. So that cream of the crop leaves and they don't come back. One of the reasons they will leave is they don't feel like there are enough opportunities in this place they already are, or they feel as though they do not have a community where they are. So when students have higher sense of community, of engagement, of camaraderie, they are more likely to pick a local university or two. The second one is the erasure of the third place. That is a sociological phenomenon coined, I want to say, in the 70s, talking about the place that is not work/school and not home. This is a third place where you build a lot of your social skills. This is really critical. I've worked with other autistic folks to get them volunteer opportunities in these third places so they can work on social skills, that they can learn to interact with people, specifically kids, and build their confidence in being able to hold conversations, introduce themselves, and do tasks that could lead for them to be able to have their own job and another step towards independence. There is an erasure of the third place that is a phenomenon we are currently studying as a society, where teens don't have a third place to go to after school for home. They're too jam-packed with homework. Parents no longer feel safe dropping off their kids, and there aren't those safe places. I used to be given that $20 bill dropped off at a mall and said, I'll see you at the end of the day, and that taught me a lot of skills that I have now. Well, some malls don't even allow people under the age of 18 to come in without an adult. So there is this erasure of a place where we're building a lot of our social skills, a lot of our soft skills that are needed for a easier transition into adulthood. And if you're autistic and you don't have those resources, it's even harder. And the third one being the forgotten average. This is a student who might make good grades, but they're not perfect. They might have financial needs, but not enough to qualify for assistance. So they are stuck somewhere in this middle. A lot of autistic students who have lower social support needs find themselves in this, where they're no longer qualifying for maybe that special ed class, but they don't have enough support in the general ed class, and they are just stuck in that forgotten middle. So when you have those three problems together, one of the ways to combat that is providing resources such as volunteering and allowing volunteering to be a third place where they are learning those social skills. They're interacting with people. They're building a community that's going to make them want to stay where they are and not move away. They have a reason to want to be a part of their community. They have a reason to stay and make it better. They feel incorporated into the culture of their community. And then with that, if we have all those things in place and building their rapport, their ability to make connection, to network, that's going to excel them out of that forgotten average.
Now, you mentioned earlier being in San Antonio, and you were the vice president for the San Antonio Volunteer Association. So, finding a space to volunteer for us as autistic people that works for us can be an overwhelming proposition. So, do you have any suggestions for autistic people that do want to volunteer and contribute to the community they live in to hopefully stay in that community? But maybe they're not sure, where do I begin this process, Percy?
Yeah, so first thing is make a list of what you already know you like to do. If I'm looking at a mundane, repetitive task, I like to do office work. Give me my headphones and 6 hours, I will sort anything you want me to sort and I will be in heaven. If you want me to be out and engaging, if you're asking me to do something social, I want to work with kids. So kind of make that list of what do you already like to do and where can you do it. Some places that I find are more, accommodating for autistic people, museums. If you are a social person and you like to be up and moving and you have high energy, find out if there's a local children's museum near you. A lot of the times they will have programs for those with disabilities. You can come in with a buddy. Some of the schools here in San Antonio actually have partnerships with museums where they will send volunteers. So you're coming in with a coach, with a teacher, with peers. It is a lot less daunting when you get to come in with people that you are familiar with and Some museums, if you're wanting to do like an art museum, a history museum, a science museum, might have a lot calmer area. So maybe one of the things you're doing is just asking people if they have questions. You're taking tickets as they're coming in. You're organizing the objects as they get moved around and interacted with. And so those can be some nice low social but high impact and moving ones. And they will probably have opportunities such as data entry, filing, reception work. I really recommend museums. There's so much flexibility in what you can do and usually what times you can do it that align better with a lot of people's schedules and just availability, both physical and emotionally. And then check out to see if any of the, disability focused groups take volunteers. Sometimes it's nice to just serve a community you are from. So for example, here we have the Down Syndrome Association where students, when they feel ready, can volunteer there. And so they are helping students that have similar life struggles as they do, but also you'll know how to celebrate with them when they have those big milestones. You'll be able to interact and play and have fun and honestly almost just speak someone's language. So find out if there is an organization you really enjoy. Find out if they need help. Sometimes they might want people to come and play with kids during a respite night. Sometimes they'll also need office help. Sometimes if you like going out into the community, outreach. There's a lot of things and ways to get involved, but make a list of places of things you already know you like to do. Find out where you can do them and check out other disability focused groups and museums for opportunities. Usually they'll say it on the website under like get involved, they'll say volunteers and they'll have all that information for you.
Now, speaking of volunteering, you've developed a 4-year volunteer program for youth that covers social, emotional, physical, and career skills and needs. What results have you seen when social and emotional needs of youth are being emphasized in their lives?
Yeah, I see that students will just bloom in ways that you would not have imagined. I have seen 14-year-old boys have some of the most insightful, emotionally intelligent conversations that I can't even have with a grown adult. And here they are using words that we've learned, right? Using emotional intelligence, self-awareness, being able to say, oh, I'm having an emotion of shame and it is fueling conflict. And I think that's why I lashed out on my friends the other day. And being able to pinpoint all those little things meant that that student can go, okay, now I know what I need to work on so I don't do that again. And then he's saying that very comfortably around other people, around other friends. And his friends can pipe in and say, yeah, dude, you're really hard on yourself. We've kind of noticed that. We're really glad that you are too. What can we do to support you? We can hype you up. We can give you compliments. We can call you out when you're kind of talking down about yourself. Like, we're here to help you. And these are 14-year-old boys that normally you're not seeing those kind of conversations, not because they're not capable, but because we haven't expected that of them and we're not giving them the tools to reach that. So I have seen students go from very quiet, reserved, and intimidated to confident speakers, to being able to do public speaking, being able to advocate for themselves and being able to network. I've seen a lot of students become very confident, not just academically, not just as a community member, but confident in who they are and what they want to do. I've seen a lot of students go from, oh, I plan to leave San Antonio and never come back. This place has done nothing for me. As soon as I'm out, and I'm never coming back, to coming to a local university and starting a nonprofit that is going to be helping the families in San Antonio because they have been given the opportunity to see the needs of their communities and been offered opportunities to fill those needs. And that just charges something in you that you don't want to stop. So with this, it's 4 years. You start as a freshman, go all the way until you're a senior in high school. So you have a team, you have mentorship, you have chances to be a leader. We're focusing on your social emotional intelligence, and then we're going through the general things that are super important to being an adult. So do you know how to write a resume and a cover letter? What are the common interview questions you're going to get, how to answer them, how to dress for the job and be successful, how to network. But also we'll teach students how to change their car tire, basic budgeting. What do you need to have to apply to college, to apply for scholarships, to apply for financial aid? How do you ask for those recommendation letters? And how do you keep those people posted on all of your successes? How do you start building that framework that you need? What is important for your community to thrive, and what is your responsibility to your community? I stole this from another organization up in Minnesota, but one thing I often say is you have the right to ask for help and the duty to assist when possible. And I think that really creates what this whole program is for. I've had almost all of my students have been minorities, whether that is disability, queerness, being BIPOC, coming from a lower social economic level than their peers, and yet all of them have had major successes in what is successful for them and not just a template of westernized American success story. Well, what isn't a success for that student? One success for a student might be getting into Harvard, whereas another success might be graduating high school to begin with. And those are held at the same standard because that is what the student needed.
Now, Percy, do not judge me too harshly, but I'm 46 years old and I've never changed a car tire.
Then you have been very lucky and fortunate in your life.
Maybe I'm capable of it, maybe not. Who knows?
Or I think I had to change my first car tire last year for a friend.
Oh, okay. So there's hope for me, you think?
There's hope, for sure.
Recently, you were chosen by the Texas Council for Developmental Disabilities as a youth ambassador. I read where you wrote that you said you were excited to advocate for your community on health and medical autonomy. In what areas of health and medical autonomy do you think are often neglected that you want to advocate for, whether presently or in the future?
Yeah, I think one of my biggest focus with advocation is accommodation in the doctor's office. I think there's a lot of times where don't want to speak for myself, but I know a lot of us have this feeling of being autistic and in a doctor's office is a different type of struggle. Whether that is trying to describe how you feel, trying to know what is a symptom and what is just part of being autistic. For many of us, our bodies do not regulate temperature the right way. So if I'm always hot, that doesn't necessarily mean I need to go see a doctor. That means I'm autistic and my body doesn't regulate heat right. Whereas, what would it be to mean to actually have to go? For many of us, myself included, it is hard to make that phone call to call the doctor in the first place. The scheduling, the transportation, and then getting into the office. There's been many times where I have talked over, I have been dismissed, or my concerns were completely just thrown out the window. A lot of times with the doctor saying, you don't know what's going on in your body, and dismissing what I'm saying, often under the premise that I'm autistic, I don't actually know. And I've had issues with my health not being treated appropriately because of doctors not wanting to accommodate my needs or wanting to not trust that I know my body. So I've had really unfortunate circumstances with really fortunate ones of, for me, the worst one is the dentist. Going to the dentist is awful for me. If you could knock me out every time, I would ask for it. And I've had dentists who did not understand my concerns of the noise, the textures, everything that comes into it. And I finally have a dentist that does. And it's in my file. It's on my notes. We have a system. As soon as I raise my left hand, every doctor who sees me knows they have to take a stop for me. I'm always given as many things as I needed to be successful in that. And it is not something I have to reiterate every time I go into that office and see a new doctor in that practice. It's in my file. It's in my notes. They read it and they take care of me every time. So in this, one of the projects we're working on is creating almost a template and a handout, one for medical professionals and one for autistic people looking for medical support on navigating the healthcare system, because I'm sure I've heard it's already difficult enough for someone who's neurotypical, add in autism, and it gets even more complicated. So working on creating a resource for both sides of the practice, so that way we're giving people the power, the words, the terminology, and the confidence to advocate for themselves, and giving doctors the empathy and the understanding that they need to listen and hear.
And how can our listeners learn about you beyond this interview?
For sure, I post a lot of my Indigenous art as well as my experiences of being autistic, being Indigenous, and working in my community on Instagram at underworld_archives. You could also find me on LinkedIn. My name is Percy de la Luna.
Percy, I love getting to know a little bit about you today, so thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you so much. It was great to be here.
Thanks so much to Percy for the conversation. To learn more about Percy, please check out the link in the podcast description for this episode. We always love hearing from you, and would especially love to hear from you relating to this episode regarding what ways you enjoy serving your community. Did you know Autism Personal Coach provides neurodiversity affirming support by autistics for autistics? We empower autistic adults and teens to be the best version of their authentic selves through customized life coaching and community groups. We also support parents and partners of autistic people by providing insights and guidance to bridge communication gaps and nurture mutual understanding. So please visit autismpersonalcoach.com to begin your experience of judgment-free coaching rooted in empathy, expertise, and respect for autistic identity. Until next time, I'm Doug Bletcher of Autism Personal Coach. Talk to you then.